When people talk about the greatest athletes of all time, names like Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps, or LeBron James often come up. But few know the story of a man so dominant that the rules of basketball were literally changed to stop him. His name was Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt wasn't just a great athlete, he was something else entirely. At just 16 years old, he stood over 7 feet tall, could touch the top of the backboard, and ran like a sprinter. During one high school season in Philadelphia, Wilt scored 74 points in a single game. A week later, someone else broke his record by scoring 78. So Wilt responded the only way he knew how, by dropping 90 points in his very next game. By the time he graduated, over 140 colleges were trying to recruit him. But Wilt wasn't just interested in basketball, he was also an elite track and field athlete. He competed in high jump, triple jump, and shot put, winning state championships and smashing expectations. Despite being just a teenager, Wilt was already being scouted by professional teams. The Philadelphia Warriors secretly used a territorial pick to claim his NBA rights years before he would even be eligible to play. Meanwhile, Wilt chose to attend the University of Kansas, planning to compete in both basketball and track. But there was a problem. He'd played semi-pro games in high school, and that caught the attention of the NCAA. At Kansas, Wilt couldn't play varsity basketball until his sophomore year, but when he finally did, the impact was immediate. In his very first varsity game, he scored 52 points and grabbed 29 rebounds. It was clear he was unstoppable, but the NCAA wasn't going to let him dominate that easily. In 1955 and 1956, they changed the rules. They widened the key to limit his post presence. They banned players from catching and dunking their teammates' missed shots, a move Wilt used constantly. They even created a new rule to stop Wilt from dunking his free throws. These weren't normal rule changes. These were specifically designed to contain one man. Because Wilt Chamberlain was unlike anything the sport had ever seen. By the time he led Kansas to the NCAA finals, Wilt had become a national sensation. But even with all his talent, basketball structure was still fighting against him. Teams would hold the ball for minutes just to keep it out of his hands. He loved to run and score, but opponents were using stall tactics to freeze him out of the game. It was becoming clear. If Wilt Chamberlain was going to succeed, basketball itself would need to evolve. By the time Wilt Chamberlain was finally eligible to go pro in 1959, the hype around him was unlike anything the NBA had ever seen. Fans and journalists weren't just expecting greatness, they were expecting history. And Wilt delivered. In his very first NBA game, Wilt scored 43 points, the highest total ever by a rookie in their debut. Just a few weeks later, he shattered the Philadelphia Warriors' rebounding record with 40 boards while scoring 41 points. 3 games in, and he was already breaking records. And that was just the beginning. By the end of his rookie season, Wilt Chamberlain had set or broken 8 major NBA records, including most points scored and most minutes played in a season. He averaged over 37 points and 27 rebounds per game. He didn't just win Rookie of the Year, he won MVP and the All-Star Game MVP in the same season. Something no one had ever done before. But with all that dominance came a price. Players began to target him. In one game, he was elbowed so hard he lost 2 teeth. In another, he was hit again in the same spot and had to leave the game early. Wilt felt like the referees were letting it happen. There seemed to be 2 sets of rules, one for everyone else and one for him. Despite his heroics, Wilt's team struggled to get over the hump. They made it to the playoffs but ran into the Boston Celtics, led by his greatest rival, Bill Russell. In their first postseason battle, Wilt dropped 42 points in Game 1, but it wasn't enough. Boston took the series, and just like that, Wilt's dream season ended in frustration. And this became a pattern. Game after game, season after season, Chamberlain was putting up superhuman numbers. 50 points here, 60 there, 70, then 78 in a triple overtime game. And finally, the game that changed history, 100 points in a single night in Hershey, Pennsylvania. No one has come close since. But still, no championship. No team success. Just more headlines about Wilt's stats and more criticism when his team fell short. Even when he played every minute of every game and led the league in almost every category, he was called selfish, a loser, a choker, someone who cared more about numbers than winning. Behind the scenes, the pressure was building. Wilt was constantly recognized in public. Children stared. Adults hurled racist insults. He was treated like a circus attraction. He couldn't walk down the street without being reminded that people saw him as less of a man and more of a freak. By the mid-1960s, Wilt Chamberlain had accomplished everything, except the one thing that mattered most. He had scored more points than anyone in history. He had games with 50 rebounds. He once averaged 48.5 minutes per game in a season, more minutes than actually exist in regulation. And he had that mythical 100-point game. Still, none of it seemed to be enough. Because every time he met Bill Russell's Celtics in the playoffs, the result was the same: defeat. People started to question Wilt's greatness. Critics said he cared too much about stats and not enough about winning. Headlines called him soft, a show-off, a choker. He was dominating basketball in a way no one had ever seen, yet somehow it was being used against him. Wilt began to wonder if he would ever escape that shadow. And just when things looked darkest, everything changed. In 1964, Wilt was traded to the San Francisco Warriors. There, he was paired with coach Alex Hannum, a man who didn't try to control Wilt, but instead earned his respect. Hannum challenged him, not to score more, but to be more. More of a passer. More of a defender. More of a leader. At first, it seemed risky. Wilt had always been the scoring machine. But Hannum had a vision and slowly, Wilt bought in. He began passing out of double and triple teams. He focused more on setting screens, controlling the paint, and helping his teammates thrive. His assist numbers skyrocketed. Suddenly, the selfish Wilt was averaging more assists than many point guards. And for the first time in his career, it started to pay off. In 1967, everything came together. Wilt was now with the Philadelphia 76ers. The team was loaded with talent, and Wilt, no longer obsessed with outscoring everyone, had fully embraced his role as the team's backbone. That year, the 76ers steamrolled through the regular season with a then-record 68 wins. In the playoffs, they finally did the impossible. They beat the Boston Celtics, ending their reign of dominance. And then came the finals. Facing the San Francisco Warriors, the very team he had once led, Wilt dominated on both ends. He passed, rebounded, defended, and scored when it mattered most. And this time, it wasn't about numbers. It was about winning. The Philadelphia 76ers became NBA champions. And Wilt Chamberlain, the man once accused of being too selfish, too flashy, too focused on records, was finally a champion. It had taken nearly a decade of failure, criticism, and soul-searching. But Wilt had reinvented himself, not just as a player, but as a teammate. And in doing so, he had changed the narrative. He wasn't just a stats machine anymore. He was a winner. But now that he'd finally reached the mountaintop, a new question loomed. Could he do it again? Winning his first NBA championship had finally silenced Wilt Chamberlain's critics, at least for a moment. But in a league where dynasties ruled, one ring wasn't enough. Now, the challenge was even harder, to prove it wasn't a fluke. To win again. By the late 1960s, Wilt was older but far from finished. In 1968, he was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, a team stacked with stars like Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. On paper, this was a super team before the term even existed. But chemistry was fragile, and so was luck. In 1969, the Lakers reached the NBA Finals to face, you guessed it, the Boston Celtics. But this time, Boston was aging. Russell was in his final season. LA was favored. This was supposed to be Wilt's moment. But it ended in heartbreak. Down the stretch of Game 7, with everything on the line, Chamberlain injured his leg. He was ready to come back in, but the coach left him on the bench. The Celtics won. And then Bill Russell, his greatest rival, criticized him publicly, calling him out in the press. That cut deep. Wilt had spent years battling Russell on the court. The two were compared constantly, but few knew that off the court, they had been friends. Wilt had eaten at Russell's house, slept in his bed, played with his kids. Their rivalry was real, but so was their respect. After the 1969 finals, their relationship fell apart. The following season, Wilt suffered what could have been a career-ending knee injury. At 33, most athletes would have walked away. But Wilt trained harder than ever. He came back stronger, motivated not by stats or headlines, but by something deeper: redemption. In 1972, under a new coach and a retooled system, Wilt embraced his role as a defensive anchor and playmaker. The Lakers won a record 33 games in a row, a streak that still stands today. That season, they returned to the finals, this time against the New York Knicks. Wilt dominated. Playing through a broken wrist, he grabbed 29 rebounds, scored 24 points, and led the Lakers to victory. He had done it again. Two-time NBA champion. No more what-ifs. No more he can't win. As his career wound down, Wilt flirted with boxing, volleyball, even acting. He coached briefly. And, of course, made headlines with outlandish stories, including his infamous claim of having slept with 20,000 women, a number that became legend and punchline alike. But what mattered more was what he left behind. In 1993, Wilt and Bill Russell finally spoke again. It happened on a Reebok commercial shoot with a young Shaquille O'Neal. The tension melted. They laughed, reminisced, and reignited the friendship that had been buried for over 2 decades. In his later years, Wilt focused on giving back. He launched Wilt's Wonder Women, a program to support female track and field athletes, inspired by his sister, who never had the chance to compete at the highest level. On October 12, 1999, Wilt Chamberlain passed away at the age of 63. The world lost more than a basketball player. It lost a pioneer, a trailblazer, and perhaps the most unique athlete to ever live. Wilt wasn't just tall. He was bigger than the game. His stats are still hard to believe. His strength, legendary. His stamina, unmatched. But perhaps the most incredible thing about Wilt Chamberlain was this. He didn't just break records. He forced the sport to change the rules. And that, more than anything, is the mark of greatness.